Hi everyone, it's Lisa Mears. Thank you for joining me. I love to make Halloween cards, and Pretty Pink Posh has come out with so many fun Halloween products for their August release, and today I'm going to be making 2 shaker cards using some of those products. Before I get started, I do want to mention that this is part of a Pretty Pink Posh Instagram hop where you have the chance to win a gift certificate to the Pretty Pink Posh store. If you are interested in joining in the Instagram hop, check the description box of this video for more details. Here's a look at some of the products that I'll be using from the Pretty Pink Posh release. This is the layered candy corn stencil, which is a 3-layered stencil. It's great to make backgrounds for your cards, so if you want lots of candy corn on the background of your cards, this is perfect for that. I'm also going to be using the Cauldron Shaker die. I'll be using the Spiderweb die set. It comes with this spider web and a spider. I'm also going to be bringing in the Boo Script word die, as well as the Ghost Friends stamp set. And I will have links to all of these products down in the description box below, as well as on my blog at lisamearsdesigns.com. So I have a piece of Bristol smooth cardstock that I cut down to 4 inches by 5¼ inches. I'm putting my spider web in the middle of this cardstock. I'm just tracing along the outside edges on the top, bottom, left, and right, just because I want to have a focal point in the center of my card where the ink is lighter than on the outside edges. So those lines are just going to help me know where I need my lightest ink, and then once I apply my ink, I'll be able to just erase those pencil lines. So I'm adding the Distress Oxide Twisted Citron ink to the inside of all of those pencil lines, and then once I add that ink, I'll go ahead and remove all of those pencil lines because I don't need them there any longer. I just wanted to know where the center is, where I wanted all of that light ink. Next, I'm going to come in with my next darker ink, which is Mowed Lawn, and I'm just going to ink blend right around that circle of light ink. So just going around in a circle on that cardstock around the lightest ink. Once I've applied Mowed Lawn, I will come in with my last ink color. This is my darkest green. It's called Rustic Wilderness, and I will add it over all of the remaining white area. So I have a dark around the edges, then I have a mid-tone and light ink in the middle of this card. Once I've applied that dark ink, I'll go ahead and just reapply the mid-tone again to blend it better in with the dark, and then I'll come in with the lightest ink and I will blend that as well a little bit better with that mid-tone just to get a really good blend. To finish up this background, I'm going to squeeze some black acrylic paint onto my mat and spritz it with water, mix it up with a paintbrush. Once I have it all mixed up with that water, I'll go ahead and take my paintbrush and I'm going to flick the ink onto the background just to create some more interest onto this card layer. So I'm going to set this background aside to dry, and in the meantime I'm going to start coloring up the images of these ghosts. So I've used 3 ghosts from the Ghost Friends stamp set. I'm only going to show the coloring of 1 because coloring the ghosts is really the same with all 3. So I stamped it onto Bristol smooth cardstock, and I am using my Zig Clean Color Real Brush pens. I added the light gray ink along the edges of the ghost. When coloring ghosts, I always like to add a light gray ink around the edge, but only the edge, and then blend it in towards the center. So I use the blender pen over top of that light gray ink and just blended it a little bit. I don't color the entire ghost, I just add a little bit of shadow around the edges. For the cheeks, I just added a little bit of the Sugar Almond pink to give some color to the cheeks. And now for the hat, I'm coming in with deep violet around the edges. I'll also then come in with the violet color followed by the English lavender. So I'm using 3 colors to get a nice purple shading for this witch's hat. I'm not using the blender on this hat, so just those 3 color purples. For that stripe in the hat, I am using the orange color as well as around the edges of the pumpkin, and then I'm going to come in with the blender and then just blend that color towards the center. For the broom, I color that in the beige, and I'm also going to come in with the blender just to blend that color, give it some shading. I'm also going to color the stick of the broom with gray and then fill in the center with the blender. If you don't have a blender, you can use a water brush. It will do the same thing. For the lollipop, I'm using the sugar almond pink as well as the peach pink. And for the bow, I'm using violet towards the center and English lavender on the edges. And then for the bow there on the top, I am using peach pink towards the center and blender towards the edges. I'll color the remaining two ghosts off camera and die cut them with the coordinating dies. So I'm just going to add the bows to a couple of the ghosts. So I'll just glue them on, and then I have this lollipop. I'm going to put glue on the front of the stick and then stick it inside of the pumpkin basket and then just kind of glue that together. And then this pumpkin basket with the lollipop, it's going to be glued onto the ghost's hand. So I end up switching out that third ghost. So instead of using the one that's moving towards the left, I decide to come in with a different ghost that's actually moving towards the right. And the purpose of that is just because of how I'm going to be laying out my card. So I'm going to go ahead and add the bow to the top of this ghost's head. And then I'll set these ghosts aside so that I can start working on my Spiderweb Shaker. I die cut the Spiderweb die out of some black cardstock. I also have a piece of acetate sitting there on the table. I'm putting some glue on the back of the Spiderweb die cut piece, and then I'm going to add that die cut to the top of the acetate. And this piece is going to become my shaker cover. Next, I'm going to take my scissors and I just need to cut around the outside edge of the spiderweb to remove all of the excess acetate. So I'm just going along the edge using some mini scissors, and I just need to cut all of the acetate around so there's no acetate extending beyond the edge of that spiderweb. Next, I'm going to take the Spiderweb die and die cut a piece of foam. Here is what that looks like. I'm going to go ahead and take the backing off. I'm going to put some glue on the back just as some extra adhesive, and I'm going to add the spiderweb to the center of this card layer. Before I press it down to that card layer, I do take out one of the ghosts. I'm going to actually have this ghost tucked behind the spiderweb, so I'm going to glue this ghost down first. You can see I'm just using the spiderweb for placement before I glue that ghost down. I want to make sure that it's far enough down underneath that spiderweb so that it doesn't go off of my card layer. I'm going to do the same thing with this second ghost, only this one is going to be peeking out of the top left corner. So again, gluing that down first, and then I'll go ahead and press down the spiderweb. I think that's going to be super cute with those ghosts coming up out of the spiderweb. I'm ready to add some clay confetti. This is the Spooky Night Mix from Pretty Pink Posh. This is one of their new clay confetti mixes. There are 4 in total, and they're such fun colors for Halloween. I'm going to be placing each one of these little confetti pieces individually inside of the spider web, just because there's not a lot of room inside this spider web. And I was trying to get some of the smaller or thinner pieces that I can hand pick inside of the spider web so that it would fit better. I decide to also bring in some of the Monster Mash mix and add some of these lighter colors as well. Once I have all of my shaker pieces inside of the spider web, I'll go ahead and remove the adhesive backing from the spider web foam piece. And then I'm going to take my glue and just put a little bit of glue on top of that foam just for some extra adhesive. And then I'll add the black cover piece with the acetate right on top of the foam. That Spiderweb die also comes with a spider, which I die cut out of some white cardstock, and I'm just coloring it up with my Zig markers. So just coloring it up with the violet and the English lavender Zig markers, and going over a few times to get a darker purple color. I'm going to go ahead and add that spider to the center of my spider web. And I'm going to add the Boo Script Word die. I die cut that out of some orange cardstock, so I'm going to add glue behind it and add that to the bottom right hand corner of my card. I'm also going to bring in that last ghost. This last ghost is going to be partially on the spider web and partially on the actual card layer. So because it's going to be on two different layers here, and that spider web is actually raised because it has foam behind it, I'm going to need to attach the top right hand corner of that ghost with glue to the actual spider web, but then the left hand part of that ghost is going to have some foam attached to the back. So I just cut up a little piece of foam, put it on the left hand side of the spider, and then I'm going to add glue to the flat side and add that to the spider web. I do have to add one more small piece of foam underneath that broom. So I'm just cutting up another little piece of foam and tucking it behind the broom. I'm going to add this layer to a piece of black cardstock that I cut down to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. I think that black on the edges really brings out that black in the spider web, and the black ink that I splattered on that card front, it just makes everything pop. And then I'll add this entire layer to an A2 size card base. My card base measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. For my next card, I'm going to be using the layered candy corn stencil. I'm using layer A here. I've cut down a piece of Bristol smooth cardstock to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. I added the first layer there on top, and I'm using the Squeezed Lemonade Distress Oxide ink to fill in this entire stencil. Once I finish with the first layer, I'll go ahead and remove that stencil, and I'll add the second stencil. This is layer B, right to the top. I'll line it up, and then I'm going to add the Carved Pumpkin Distress Oxide inks. So this Carved Pumpkin ink is the middle layer of the candy corn. That Squeezed Lemonade, the yellow ink, was the top layer of the candy corn. And once I finish inking this second layer up, I'm going to add the next stencil, and I'm ready to ink up the bottom of the candy corn. So I'm just going to line this last stencil up, and the ink I'm using for this one is called Fog, and this is a Scrapbookcom ink. We know that the bottom of these candy corns are traditionally white. Well, I didn't want to use white ink because it wouldn't show up against the white cardstock. So using a light gray ink will show up better against the white cardstock. Next, I'm going to use this scallop circle die, and I die cut it out of orange cardstock as well as out of white cardstock. I'm going to use the frame part of that die cut in the orange, and then the centerpiece is going to be from the white die cut piece. So I'm going to go ahead and add the orange frame to my candy corn background, and then I'm going to pop in the white background. Now I'm ready to work on my shaker piece. So I'm taking the Cauldron Shaker die, and I'm die cutting it out of some foam. So here's my foam piece. Next, I'm going to take that same die and die cut it out of black cardstock. So I'm going to take my foam. It is double-sided on both sides, so I peeled back the backing to expose the adhesive. I did add some glue to the back just to add some extra adhesive, and I'm sticking it down on the scalloped frame die cut piece. I'm adding the center black piece right inside of the cauldron. Next, I'll take the black die cut cauldron, and I'm going to add glue around the edges and add it to a piece of clear acetate. Next, I'm going to take this piece and I need to trim off the extra acetate. So I'm just going to use my scissors and cut along the straight edge at the top, and then I'm going to come into these little corners, and I'm actually going to lift up the handle and just cut around the actual shape of the cauldron. Once I finish cutting around all of this acetate, I will set that piece aside and I'm going to come back to the actual card base, and I'm going to add some clay confetti to the center of my Cauldron Shaker piece. This is the Halloween party mix. Now before I just pour the confetti inside of the cauldron, I am gluing some pieces towards the top of the cauldron. And the reason I'm doing that is because if the card is standing upright, all of the pieces will end up falling to the bottom of the cauldron if I don't glue any toward the top. And I actually wanted to have some shown at the top even if the card is standing upright. So after I glue down a few of those confetti pieces, I go ahead and pour the rest in. And now I'm ready to add the top of the cauldron. So I'm going to take that piece that I added the acetate to, and I'm going to put glue on the back side. I will remove the double-sided adhesive backing from the foam part of the shaker, and then I'll go ahead and stick the top piece of the cauldron right on the foam. So now all of those shaker pieces are enclosed within that cauldron. And now I'm going to take some more of the shaker pieces and I'm going to glue them to the top almost like they're boiling out of that cauldron. So I'm just going to take a few here and glue them directly onto that white cardstock inside of that circle frame. I'm going to use a sentiment from the Halloween envelopes, stamps, and die set. That matching die set actually has a banner die, so I used the banner die cut a piece of white cardstock, and I'm just going to stamp the sentiment right inside of the banner. My sentiment says trick or treat. And before I add that sentiment, I do want to add some twine. I just grabbed some twine from my stash. This twine is black and white. I'm just tying it around the bottom of that card. I'm going to go ahead and tie it in a knot here off to the left and then add a bow. And I will trim off the bottom of that bow on each side. And then I'll go ahead and add the banner sentiment right below the twine. I'm going to make sure that the straight edge of that banner is aligned with the edge of the card. Next, I'm going to turn this layer over, and because I don't want so much bulk with this twine, because remember this has to go on a card base still, I just added some double-sided adhesive tape to hold the twine down to the back of the cardstock, and then I just cut out the middle of the twine. So I didn't want all that extra bulk when I add this to a card base. So now I'm going to go ahead and add glue to the back of this card layer. And I'm going to add this to an A2 size card base. My card base is an orange card base. It's actually the same color that I used for the orange frame. And that completes that card. So I hope you liked my cards today. If you did like this video, please click that thumbs up button. I will have product links in the video description as well as on my blog. So if you're interested in any of these products, do check out those links. And lastly, don't forget to click that subscribe button and turn on your bell notifications so that you'll be notified every time I release a new video. Thanks for watching and have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.